Hi, let us talk a bit about how to name a good brand. There are various ways to do it, and branding is such an important aspect of any business. So what is the definition of a brand? What does brand stand for? Let's start with a boring definition. Well, a brand is a distinguishing symbol, mark, logo, name, word, sentence, or a combination of these items that companies use to distinguish their product from others in the market. I wanted to read it to make sure because this is the official definition. And it is so boring. What is brand about? It is extremely correct way of representing it, but it's much more than that. In fact, brand is all about emotions, all sorts of emotion, the variety of emotions that we have. What kind of emotion do these words, logo, text, phrases, everything that has been mentioned in the boring definition represent? See what experts say about branding. There is a nice definition from Set Coding, and this again I will read it just to make sure I read it right. A brand is the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that taken together account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. Thanks, Seth. If the consumer, whether it's a business, a buyer, a voter, or a donor, does not pay a premium, make a selection, or spread the word, then no brand value exists for that consumer. He goes on. A brand value is merely the sum total of how much extra people will pay or how often they choose the expectations, memories, stories, and relationships of one brand over the alternatives. Let's make life a little simple and see what all these mean in a bit more detail and an easier detail. Well, like we mentioned, a brand is all about emotions. At the same time, the first thing I generally advise to start deciding when you're thinking about how to brand your product or service is to understand whether this product or service is a business to business, business to consumer, or business to consumer, or whatever combination you're looking at. Because the answers that you need will be completely different for each of these scenarios. So how is this different for each of these scenarios and what is exactly involved? In all of them, the key thing that is involved is feeling. How do you feel after looking at this brand, after feeling this brand, after listening to this brand? All our senses are involved in understanding this brand. Now let's go a bit more into detail. Visual is the first thing that comes to mind when you're looking for brands. When you're looking at a certain logo, certain packaging, certain standard of quality, certain standard of pricing, and so on, we see. In fact, they say that above 25% of our brain is involved in seeing. Whether it is 25% or not, a large part of us keeps on looking, watching, and feeling through vision. Speaking of vision, a beautiful thing is color. Color has an amazing impact on branding. And again, this depends on your B2B or B2C and other kind of categories. But color is something that evokes emotion in us without even speaking, without even audio, without even any other way that we need to communicate. This is mind-blowing. This is a beautiful expression, isn't it? The next thing that we see is that of sound. How does your brand sound? You can look at colors, you can look at logos, they evoke a feeling, but people also want to understand how does it sound. They want to listen to it. In fact, in today's world, sound is extremely important. I'll tell you why in various forms. It's not just how people speak and how you hear. You have to also see how are you audible over a mic, how are you audible in a stage, how are you audible over the phone when you are asking your salesperson to call someone. How does it sound when you say your brand over the phone? Does it have a funny feeling when spoken on a device? And speaking of devices, these days what we see is with smartphones with artificial intelligence. with things like Alexa and Siri and Google now, where people speak to devices, does it sound all right? Does it take noise? Does it sound something that can be misinterpreted? And looking at colors, looking at sound, and as we go on other senses as well, you have to be cautious of culture as well. Well, you can't be too cautious, but it's always good to be safe, on the safe side. Powerful thing is about being sticky. By sticky, I really mean being easy to remember, being easy to recall. That remains with us. Human attention these days is extremely limited, and we really have to make sure that whatever we are using, all the criteria that we are looking at, it makes us stick in the minds of our audience. Remember, the audience needs to remember in the right way. In fact, one of the brands that comes to mind is Go Compare, where there is this extremely annoying opera singer, but everybody remembers that. A lot of them actually hate that, but still they remember it. Now you have to ensure whether you want a love-hate relationship. At the same time, they have done an amazing job of stickiness. Let's move on to the next one. And this one is a bit interesting. Some of the good brands, in fact the first one that comes to mind is Zomato. People use Scrabble scores, people use Z, K and those kind of letters which are very rare, but because they are rare, people remember them a lot, and they change some consonants in their pronunciation in order to make a brand. It makes it sticky. Well, test it out. It does not work for everybody, but it has really worked for some of them. So what's the next one? The next one is a bit simpler. In fact, some people start by asking this question: why is this brand called so? A simple way of looking at it, isn't it? Why is it called that? Why is your product called that? In fact, your product could be named something which will represent a lot of it. It can be descriptive, it can be after your founder, which is an old style. It does not stick. In fact, it is easily forgotten, except some of the old brands which have stuck since more than 5 to 10 decades, more than 100 years if you see. But why is your brand called that? Look at it. Why is Uber called Uber? The next thing, ask questions, especially to your audience, to your target audience. Ask them, is this something that sticks to you? Try this A/B testing with Facebook ads, where you give 2 ads and check it. Which ad generates more impressions, more likes, more comments? Call them over a phone call. Which one makes people feel better about it? Don't just try it on friends, because there is a bias there. Try it on actual audiences that you are targeting. Again, remember, whether it is B2B, B2C or B2B2C and so on, whatever combination you want. This really is an acid test, because if your audience does not like it, you might as well stop listening to this video, because no one will like it if your audience does not like it. Well, moving on. Competition positioning or competitive positioning is something that your brand needs to really understand. Where are we put in this scenario? Where do we want to be seen at? What is our message when we are talking about it? Some people have the word first in their name. Some people have the word one in their name. Some people have alpha. Some people have base, and so on and so forth. So again, this is all I'm speaking from English, because other languages would have other ways of positioning that as well. In fact, one of the brands that comes to mind from India is Gati, and Gati represents speed, and they are a courier company. They are one of the largest ones. They do a great job. But look at Gati. In fact, you should look at their logo as well. It is amazing the way they are positioning themselves. They're actually telling why they are different. Straight on, no explanation needed. So speaking of messaging, the next thing that comes to us is identity. What is our brand speaking about us? Can people relate to it straight on when they look at it? Because this is what is representing us without our presence. What is our brand telling? Are we global? Look at MasterCard. It shows a transaction, it shows global, it shows a lot of things. In fact, look at Visa as well, the way they have positioned it. This is all about identity and messaging. Why you need this very clear right now is because you will be using this in all your corporate communications and so on in future. This is going to be how you speak to your customers, speak to your audience. Speaking of that, your brand needs to be tested. How is it displayed in various media? In fact, one of the things that people mention about creating a logo is about making it symmetrical so that it can be printed and it looks the same from various angles. But it's not just about the logo, it's not just about the shape. Your brand should be very visible in all sorts of digital media as well as offline media. Banners, display boards and so on, t-shirts, coffee cups, whatever you are using. In fact, this is a nice way of putting where Intel really wanted to show their positioning, and their product is always inside the box, but they have Intel inside. The logo says it all and it's outside the box. That's innovative. So this is how you have to plan. Where are you displaying? How are you showing things? Display is one of the key things in this case. Moving on. What does your brand say when you are not there? What does it accomplish when you are not present? Because it's representing you when you are not there. You are your first salesperson. But as the brand grows, as the company grows, people should get the point straight away. This is something related to identity, this is something related to positioning, this is something related to messaging, and this is something that actually conveys. And I go back to my example of Gati, where Gati means speed, and it does convey exactly what is Gati standing for. Now again, it is a local company, it has a local name. FedEx, look at the messaging that is involved with FedEx. So these are the things that you have to say, how your brand is speaking when you are not speaking, when you are not present. What is it accomplishing? Moving on. You have to protect your brand. It is your child, it is your creation. It can be, we live in a very strange world, and you should always protect your brand. There are various ways of doing it. You could be trademarking it. Now, speaking of protection, you should not infringe on someone else's protected brand. That is also extremely important, because protection applies both ways, isn't it? Now, whatever you have decided with all these criteria, with all this logic, it is time taking. So do put them in 3 buckets and understand which one is the best. In fact, have a best case scenario, have a worst case scenario, and then choose something out of it. It does take time, but definitely it is a process that you have to do once in a good way, so that things are to be used for the rest of the life of your company or your business and your brand. And whatever you have chosen, now that you have to be using it everywhere, the key term now is to be consistent. Why we are consistent is this is how we are going to represent ourselves. Like I mentioned, you have different promotion materials, different marketing materials. Your letterhead would have to have that brand. Your signboards would have to have that brand. And consistency is the name of the game in this case. Be consistent. The more you are consistent, you are making a mental imprint in the audience's mind. Consistency is really important. While speaking of that, while doing all this kind of analysis and preparation, one thing that businesses do get stuck is chasing perfection. Now, you really want a great thing, but please remember, every brand has its own flaws at the end of the day. Even the best brands today have some flaws, and you cannot really keep on changing things or chasing perfection. Once you have something, you have to ensure that it works to your advantage in the best manner. A bunch of things that we now have to consider in order to create a good brand that can sustain throughout the life of our business and even beyond. But remember one thing. These days, there is a huge focus on design, which is a very positive thing. But design by itself is not a brand. Design by itself is not conveying everything that you really want your brand to convey. Design is very important, but don't get stuck there. See, what do you want to expect? Consider brand as a living thing, something that is really representing you in your absence, really conveying, speaking to you, making your audience feel the love, the appreciation that you want to convey to your customer, to your audience, to the business that you're offering, to the consumer that you're offering, to the experience that you're promising, because you are a good brand. Focus on it. Be a great brand. To get all these things as a template, as a checklist, subscribe to us. Step it up.